So what we have here is a light that just switches off, okay, after 3 seconds. What we can do is we can get rid of this delay node, and we're going to add a new timeline node in here instead, okay? So if I pull out of here, I can type in timeline. And this here node, I should have named it first, but whatever, basically plays a timeline which allows us to manipulate numbers and data over a set period rather than an instant, okay? So whenever we make this, we should name it. I'm going to name this intensity, just because this is what it's kind of going to do. You'll notice that it's got a lot of input nodes and a few other output nodes here, and I'll go over those in a second. Yeah, it's always a good idea to name these because this actually goes down into one of your variables. So it does. So if you haven't got it named properly and you've got all these different variables, and this is something that we will check when marking your work, it gets really hard to identify what is what, okay? So yeah, this here has a lot of input nodes. You'll notice that the event graph is going into the play one, which is totally fine. We also have a play from start. So this is going to play from wherever it's kind of left off in the timeline. So if we've played this already and it's halfway through, and we hit the play node again, it's going to play from halfway through, where this one's going to play from the very start. This one would stop it, this one would reverse it, this one would reverse it from the end. This would set a new time, and this is the new time, okay, that we're going to play a reverse from. So we can have different event nodes kind of plugging in, or different functions even plugging into these different nodes, depending on what we want to do. Then on the output, we basically got an update. And this is like the event tick. Whenever this is playing, this is going to fire off every frame. And then whenever this is played, either reverse or play forward, it's finished. This is going to execute once. So it is. And then this data pin basically tells us what direction it's going in. Is it going forward or is it going in reverse? We don't need to worry about that now. If we want to get into the timeline, we just double click on the timeline. You're going to see there's not much interest in here. There's a space up here where we can add new tracks, okay, a float, vector, event track, color track. We can set the length of our timeline, and then we can do a few things like, instead of setting the length, we can go just use the last keyframe as how long it plays. So wherever that last keyframe is, we can just tell it to autoplay, so we don't even need to have it linked up to anything. It'll just autoplay. Turn that off. We can tell it to loop, and then there's a few other things as well that we can do, but I won't go into them just yet. So to know what track that we're going to use or add into this, we should first go to what data we're going to manipulate. Again, if I hover over this pin, it's telling me it's a float, and a float is a number with a decimal point. So if I go back into my timeline, I can go up to this here, or double click the node itself. I can see that I can add a float track, okay? And in here, I'm going to just type in intensity again, or I'll call it intensity track. And this is our track. I'm going to set the length to 1 second. I'm going to make sure that it loops as well. Okay, I'm going to put those two things in. So in here is where we can basically add in keyframes by holding shift and clicking. And it will tell us where in the timeline this keyframe is, what time it is, and the value, okay, what number is going to be output by here. So, you know, this here is going to be output 0.3 at 0.1 seconds. And then if I add these in, that might be too many. Let me delete that. Okay, and maybe delete this as well. You can see that, you know, the intensity of the output or the number is going to be up and down over the place, so we can kind of make this flickered light. Okay, and because it's looping, we only have to do 1 second, and it'll just kind of loop through the whole thing for us, which is pretty cool. So that's shift and just clicking on these. So whenever we're playing through this, it's going to play through the timeline, and wherever these lines and nodes are, it's going to just pick out whatever number these are at. So you can see here on this line, it's 0.3 seconds, 0.2, and then over here it's 0.39 seconds, and it's 0.34, so it's a bit higher. And then what we could do is we can plug the update into this. So this is going to update every frame, and we're going to go the intensity track into here. It's not going to work, but I'm just going to press play and show you anyway. So if I press play, you're going to notice my light's gone. Why is it gone? This is working, okay? But the numbers coming out of this are so small, okay, that the light isn't really appearing. So if we go to our point light, you can see that the default intensity is 5000, where the values coming out of this are going to be like 0.3 or something like that. So what we can do is we can pull this out, this data pin, this float data pin, it knows it's a float. And if we hit Shift 8, we're going to get the star key, okay, which is the multiplication sign in Unreal 4. And we're going to go to this float, multiply by float. So whatever number is coming out of here every frame, we're going to multiply that by, is that 50,000, okay? And then we've got an input pin, you can see, okay, 2 input pins, so it's taking like an A and a B, and it's multiplying A by B. And then it's outputting the results here, okay? So we can just go like that. In this here one as well, we can add more pins, so we can go multiply A by B, multiply by C, and it'll give you the results. I'm just going to right click and I'm going to remove that pin. So now if we press play, you can see that we can see our light. It was just that the intensity was too low. So one last thing we'll do with the timeline, we can change the color in this light. So if I pull this out and type in color, and it's the American version of color, so no U, we can set the light color with this. And I'll just connect these up, just string them together. So I can set the default light color, say, to blue. And if I press that, it's going to be blue now, which is pretty cool. Before I kind of show you this though, there's one thing I just want to go through. I'm just going to disconnect these, okay? So this isn't working right now. Whenever you bring in a class, and this is one of the cool things about classes in Unreal, if I bring in multiple of these, okay, I can actually go into the component section for that instance. Remember, these are an instance of the class. Select the light, and I'm not going to be able to change the intensity. You know, I can change it here, but once I press play, it's going to roll back to whatever is in this timeline. But I can change the color of it, okay? So I can have multiple instances of the same class, but their defaults are changed, as long as their defaults aren't then manipulated by some code, okay, within the event graph. So if I press play now, you can see I've got like a blue flashing light and a white flashing light, okay? It's a pretty simple thing that you can do. And it's really, really powerful. And then when we come to do variables and stuff like that there, you'll see that even having public variables, you can change quite a bit as well through those, even if they're manipulated through this. So what we'll do is we'll connect these back up. Okay, so the point light goes in target. And we'll go back to our timeline and we'll make a new color track. This is going to look a bit different from here, but basically whenever you create a new node, you can double click here to determine what color it is, and double click here to determine what opacity. Now when you're dealing with the light, it doesn't use opacity, but if you're dealing with like maybe a particle effect or something like that, you can manipulate it in here. But I'll double click this, I'll make it red. I'll right click this and just remove this pin, and double click this one, I'll change it to blue as well. So hopefully what we'll have is our light going from like red to blue, okay, over time. So it might look a bit like a cop car or something like that. Oh, I forgot one thing. Let's rename this to color track. All right, and then in our event graph, we've got to make sure that we plug our color track into our new light color. All right. One thing is you'll notice that these wires are kind of crossing each other and it's getting a bit messy. If you find that, you can double click a wire and it brings up a reroute node. And I'll do this on the other end. And this doesn't really do anything other than reroutes it, and you can make it look cleaner. Other thing I can do is instead of having this come off into 2 different nodes, I can just grab another reference, okay, plug that in. So it looks a bit tighter, okay. And yeah, try and do this as much as possible. Having things like overlap with each other like this here just makes it impossible for me to look at and decipher what you've been doing. So this should work now. Yeah, so red to blue, okay. So we kind of got like some cop car lights going on. So yeah, that's some new nodes, some information on dragging in instances of a class and being able to manipulate default values within those, based on that they're not used within the event graph. Because if I try and change the intensity or color in this here one to like green, because they're linked to this timeline, they'll just change through code. But you know, like things that aren't like, you know, the radius, so I can make it like really small, press play, it's only going to affect that small area now. So you can have multiple instances of the same class and change default values in it. Okay, in the next video what I'm going to do is going to show you what a level blueprint is, how that works, and why we shouldn't use it.